The idea that good intentions produce good results is one of the most seductive and dangerous myths of our time. It's what I've called, borrowing from Hayek, the fatal conceit of the anointed. Those elites who believe their moral passion or grand visions can override the realities of human nature and economic constraints. In The Vision of the Anointed, I wrote, the people who have the most compassion often have the least interest in examining the consequences of the policies they advocate. That's not a throwaway line. It's a diagnosis of a pervasive intellectual failure. Look at welfare policies, for instance. The intention was noble: help the poor, provide a safety net. But what happened? In the decades following the expansion of welfare programs in the 1960s, we saw family structures collapse, dependency rise, and urban poverty entrench itself. Why? Because the incentives were misaligned. If you pay people more to stay out of work than to take low-wage jobs, you're not helping them, you're trapping them. If you subsidize single motherhood, you get more of it, which often means more children growing up in unstable environments. The data backs this up. By the 1990s, nearly two-thirds of black children were born to unmarried mothers, a sharp rise from the 1960s. Good intentions didn't cause that. Bad incentives did. Or take rent control, another darling of the compassionate crowd. The goal is to keep housing affordable, especially for the poor. Sounds wonderful. But what's the result? In cities like New York or San Francisco, rent control has led to housing shortages, dilapidated buildings, and skyrocketing prices for everyone else. Landlords facing capped rents stop maintaining properties or convert them to condos. New construction dries up because developers can't make a profit. In Stockholm, Sweden, rent control created wait lists for apartments stretching over a decade. The poor, whom these policies were meant to help, end up in worse conditions, often pushed to the margins of the city. The intention was to make housing affordable. The outcome was to make it scarce. That's not compassion. It's cruelty dressed up as kindness. Minimum wage laws are another example. The intention is to ensure workers earn a living wage. But what happens when you mandate higher wages than the market can bear? Businesses hire fewer people, especially low-skilled workers like teenagers or immigrants who need entry-level jobs to get a foot in the door. In 2019, the Congressional Budget Office estimated that a $15 federal minimum wage could eliminate 1.3 million jobs. Black youth unemployment, already high, spikes further when these laws kick in. The intention was to lift people up. The outcome was to lock them out. Intentions don't pay the bills, jobs do. This brings me to the core of the issue. Incentives drive behavior, not hope or ideals. In Basic Economics, I wrote, the first lesson of economics is scarcity. The first lesson of politics is to ignore the first lesson of economics. Scarcity means there are always trade-offs, and incentives determine how people navigate them. People aren't angels, they're human. They respond to costs and benefits, not to slogans or moral posturing. If you subsidize unemployment, you get more of it. If you cap rents, landlords stop investing. If you tax businesses too heavily, they move overseas or cut jobs. And in the 1980s, high corporate taxes in the U.S. drove capital flight. After Reagan's tax cuts, investment surged and unemployment dropped from 7.5% in 1981 to 5.4% by 1989.
This is
The road to hell is paved with good intentions and bad incentives. Politicians and activists love to sell their policies with soaring rhetoric, but rhetoric doesn't change reality. What matters is what people do in response to the rules you set. If you ignore that, you're not just naive, you're reckless. Now, let's talk about why results matter more than rhetoric. One of the most infuriating habits of the anointed is their refusal to look at empirical evidence. They judge policies by their intentions, not their outcomes. In The Vision of the Anointed, I pointed out much of the social history of the Western world over the past 3 decades has involved replacing what worked with what sounded good. Take public housing. Intention was to provide decent homes for the poor. Bill examples, billions were spent. But by the 1980s, projects like Chicago's Cabrini Green or St. Louis's Pruitt-Igoe were synonymous with crime, decay, and despair. Why? Because the incentives were perverse. Concentrating poverty in isolated government-run complexes didn't empower people, it dehumanized them. Maintenance was abysmal because no one had a stake in the property. Crime flourished because the social fabric was shredded. Contrast that with policies that got the incentives right. Welfare reform in the 1990s under Clinton tied benefits to work requirements. The result? Welfare rolls dropped by half, and poverty rates for single mothers fell from 41.9% in 1996 to 33.5% by 2000. School choice programs like those in Milwaukee or Florida gave parents vouchers to pick better schools. Test scores improved, especially for low-income kids, and public schools faced pressure to compete. Deregulation under Carter and Reagan, airlines, trucking, telecom slashed prices and spurred innovation. Airline fares adjusted for inflation fell 44% from 1978 to 2010. These policies worked not because they sounded compassionate, but because they aligned incentives with human nature and economic reality. This brings me to the moral narcissism of the anointed. Too many activists, intellectuals, and politicians are addicted to the feeling of moral superiority. They don't care if their policies fail. They care about how those policies make them look. In the vision of the anointed, I describe this as a kind of arrogance, where the elite assume they know better than the rest of us how to live our lives. They push ideas like defund the police or green energy mandates without grappling with the consequences. Higher crime rates in cities like Minneapolis or energy shortages in places like California. And here's the kicker, they bear no cost for being wrong. When their policies tank, they don't lose their jobs or their homes. The poor, the working class, the vulnerable, they pay the price. That's not just irresponsibility, it's immorality masquerading as virtue. But let me wrap this up with some hard truths. First, incentives are not optional. They shape behavior, whether you're a saint or a sinner. Even Mother Teresa's nuns responded to costs and benefits of running their missions. Second, intentions don't matter if they ignore consequences. A doctor who prescribes a drug that kills the patient isn't absolved because he meant well. Third, social policy must be judged by what happens, not what was promised. If you spend billions on a program and get worse outcomes, you don't get a pass because your heart was in the right place. This isn't just about economics, it's about moral clarity. Compassion isn't measured by how loudly you proclaim your virtue. It's measured by how much you actually help people. And if you want to help, you'd better understand incentives because they're the engine of human action. Ignore them, and you're not just wasting money, you're betraying the very people you claim to serve. The world doesn't run on feelings, it runs on reality. And the sooner we face that, the better off we'll all be.